This is Kelly Hill, technology reporter for RCR Wireless News. I'm here today with Mitch Black, who is president of Mobi. Welcome, Mitch.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. So we're going to be talking about a few trends that are going on in enterprise mobility right now. And I wanted to start off with a little bit of information on you and Mobi, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about the company and what you folks do in the enterprise mobility space.
Sure. Mobi is a managed mobility services provider, so we serve corporations in a variety of different ways, but primarily when a corporation wants to outsource their mobility environment, our company serves them in that particular regard. We do that through software as well as services, and this is something that we've been doing for really almost 14 years, but the managed mobility market itself really wasn't defined until just the last few years ago. So a lot of different dynamics today in the industry that I'm sure we're going to talk about, but that's the market in which we serve today.
Okay, great. Well, I understand that you have some data on the breakdown of what the enterprise mobility market actually looks like in terms of operating system and that sort of thing. So maybe we can kind of start there and get a picture of who dominates and how things are evolving in that space.
Yeah, so one of the key metrics that we use to measure our business is the number of devices that we manage on behalf of corporate clients. Really interesting today and really not a surprise I don't think, is where iOS has really become the dominant operating system for corporations today. I think statistically it's well over 50% of the devices that we now manage would be an iOS device. Comparatively, you have things like Android, where there's a myriad of different OEMs that provide that Android platform, but Android's probably near about 30%. And then really from there it dives down quite a bit further in terms of percentages, where BlackBerry is probably only around 11%. Now that is for the corporations that we serve today, but that's, I think, a really strong benchmark for what you would see overall in the industry.
Great. Great. And I'm assuming that you also track things like device upgrades, device activations. I don't know if you could talk a little bit about what the activity kind of looks like on that side of things for a typical corporation.
So, yeah, correct. One of the things that we're able to do is when we connect with a corporate client, we also gain a carrier feed of all of the corporate lines that they use. Statistically, you're not seeing as many net new activations as you normally had in the past, of where one company may be moving from one carrier to another. We're not seeing a lot of shifts in market share in that particular area. What we do see, though, and this is really kind of interesting, is where you're seeing some shift from corporate liable to individually liable, and that's really the essence of BYOD. So when a corporation wants to migrate away from paying the expenses of the mobile devices and the bills and moving to BYOD, you're beginning to see some amount of migration toward that area. I would really say the interesting part of that, though, is, believe it or not, as much hype as BYOD gets, we're actually seeing migrations the other way, of where a client may have been BYOD to start with or moved to BYOD and is now moving back to corporate liable. So you see a lot of those transactions that I think are very interesting. And statistically, I wouldn't necessarily say there's a major trend, but I think from a vertical perspective, we are beginning to see where some people in the financial services space who once went BYO are going back to corporate liable.
Interesting. Do you have any insight into the reasons behind that? Are they finding that the management is too complicated, or the expense is more than they had anticipated?
I think it's the latter. I think a lot of people talked about early on that BYOD was going to be a way to minimize expense of mobility in the corporation, and candidly the support cost associated with that in many cases are greater than that of supporting a corporate liable device. And so I think that is one of the key reasons that we've seen that trend. On the other hand, talking about companies that are moving to BYOD, it's very rarely a major big bang of where they say, I'm going to move everything over to BYOD. In many cases, they maintain the number of corporate liable devices they have for maybe certain parts of the business, but then they're beginning to add BYOD in addition to that, into the portfolio. And that's where a end user may want to use two devices, or there are certain people within the company that want access to email or mobile applications that weren't necessarily going to be granted to them otherwise. And so now, through the different security features that are available through such things as MDMs, they can easily migrate to BYOD. So overall, we're beginning to see the number of lines increase within corporations due to that particular reason.
Okay. I think it's interesting. I just recalled that there was, I think, a ruling in California this week as far as, funding for BYOD and some, some mandatory legal outlines as to how companies have to approach that. It's not quite as maybe loosey-goosey as it used to be.
No, it's not. And actually, I think some of those regulatory issues came up earlier in the year, and there was, at the time, I think from a media perspective, you saw a lot of more interest in BYOD again. BYOD is a buzzword that you hear quite often. The definition of it is a little bit different within each company, but a lot of these regulatory issues draw much more awareness around enterprise mobility. And whether it's corporate liable or BYOD, the particular ruling in California was very specific to end users and how they would, how they could get reimbursed on certain types of usage. And that's just one minor aspect of the overall, I think, big picture associated with BYOD.
Okay, great. Well, there was some other interesting news this week. We had Apple and IBM announcing the first wave of applications that are coming out of a partnership that they announced earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we already see iOS kind of dominating in the enterprise space. I'm curious as to what you see this partnership with IBM doing for them in terms of maybe making progress in different verticals. What impact do you see this having on the ecosystem?
So I think for Apple specifically, what it's doing for them is it's giving them the ability to have a partner that has access to all of these huge corporations where they've served them for many years, and I think they're a trusted advisor in that particular area. So if they can take an application that's secured, and these type of applications like they would provide, I think the examples that were given were like Air Canada, they would be able to provide that to them in a secured manner of where it's not going to be available on the App Store, for example. And some of these vertically focused apps that they have developed, I think are going to begin to drive a new market for them more so than they had before. So in many ways, it's enabled Apple to get into the services business in the enterprise space. And I think that's a great entry point, not only from a new acquisition perspective, but also retention. And I think the key thing for Apple, and to a certain degree Samsung as well, is they're really following the trend behind the consumerization of IT. And usually what you're seeing outside from a retail perspective of people utilizing iOS and Samsung, for example, as really the leaders in the OEM handset space, all of those trends are now migrating into the enterprise space. But there's such a big difference. That device now has to have all of these services around it. You hear the term device as a service and so forth, and that's what's very important, and that's where IBM comes in. And we actually here at Mobi have a relationship with IBM as well. They're one of our partners from a channel perspective. So we've been able to see a lot of these things really grow here over the last 3 to 4 months, and I believe their partnership is going to create a lot of other new opportunities as well, and really create a new path for others. And you just recently also heard about, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, Samsung announced Samsung 360, which is a new program that will also take what they've built from a security perspective with Knox, and it will also create a services model where they begin to offer Samsung services in an agnostic approach. And what I mean by that is they may sell you a bunch of Galaxy devices, but if you have iOS devices and Blackberries, they'll create a service that will also support those.
I'm curious as to how you see the relative importance of devices versus applications when it comes to enterprise mobility. Obviously there's pieces of both, and there's also some crossover with BYOD versus the corporate liable. But access to applications is also very important. Does that drive choices as far as devices and operating systems? Is this a chicken and egg thing? How do you see it?
I think it's to a certain degree. I think the applications drive more today than the device side. Now the operating system piece, it's going to be based on the company. Every company has their IT department and their policies are a little bit different, but ultimately, the types of applications that they have, I really don't see a lot of variation yet that's being created of where we're going to create this one application only for an iOS device. In some cases, you may see some vertically integrated businesses that use like ruggedized devices, and Android has actually taken over a pretty good share in some of those ruggedized devices where Windows used to own that. And so you may have applications that may be more vertically integrated there. But in terms of what I would think professional and commercial type of applications, I have not yet to see it. We've not really seen trends of where we're going to only do this for iOS, or we're only going to do this for Android or Windows.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the role of analytics. I think part of what I think is interesting about this IBM-Apple partnership is that it's introducing or maybe expanding the use of IBM's analytics for more business intelligence for the companies who choose to use and leverage that partnership. Now, you guys do manage mobility services, and I'm curious as to what you see in terms of analytics in telecom spending and device management, or in business intelligence. What do you guys see happening in that space?
So one of the things that we provide is, we having access to all of those carrier bills, we do provide a variety of what you would consider to be expense management solutions as part of that. So we'll do a lot of optimizations around that. With our software technology, what we're able to do in many cases is take all of their carrier billing, not only make them recommendations on spending savings, but also create cost allocation and different ways that we can manage this business, help them manage their business. And I'll give you an example. In a professional services organization or a construction organization now, they will actually use some of the data that we provide, the robust reporting that we use, to allocate costs to specific projects. So they can charge back accordingly to that, where early on, when our business first started, we were kind of charging back to business units if they were a multinational company, or to particular divisions or departments within a company. And now we can actually drill it down that much further to where they can get call record data and actually apply that specifically to a particular project. So that would be one example of how our tool is actually used to drive more analytics. There are other types of reporting and analytics that our solution can provide. For example, if you want to go in and find out exactly how much more I spend on carrier billing on Apple products compared to Android products. Now, I'm not necessarily sure what the company may be using that data for, but those type of analytics are available if they want to use them.
Okay, great. All right, well, I think that that kind of ends up my questions. I didn't know if there was any way that you'd like to end this conversation. Maybe I'll look forward as to how you see the space evolving in the next year to 3 years.
Yeah, a couple of things that I think about when we're out talking about the enterprise mobility space and managed services around that. Realistically, there's so many companies that are now thinking mobile first. So when they're talking about we want to develop an application and we've got this particular need that we need to address, they're thinking about how they're going to do it on a mobile device now. And I think you're going to continue to see that evolution. And all of the companies that we would consider to be within our ecosystem, and those are EMM and MDM providers, for example, large system integrators like we talked about earlier with IBM, and also companies like HP, Accenture, that's exactly all the services that they're providing are really moving towards that particular aspect. From our, the one nice thing about us at Mobi and what we provide and the value that we bring to the ecosystem is all of these changes are creating a lot more complexity within the IT departments and corporations. And it allows us to really provide great value in the fact that we provide really a simple approach to a complex environment in terms of visibility and full life cycle management of mobile devices throughout the ecosystem. So we really see a tremendous amount of growth, and we think we love the space that we're in. It's kind of a cool place to be when you think about we are really in the middle of that convergent space of IT and mobility that's been hyped for many, many years. We're right in the smack middle of it now. So, with that being said, we think the upside for this industry and all the people in our ecosystem is very, very good.
Okay. That reminds me of one other question that I think would be interesting to hear from you on. Internet of Things, is as that trend kind of begins to manifest itself and really emerge, for the type of mobility management that you guys do, do you still primarily do, I'm assuming, end user based devices as opposed to, Internet of Things automated devices? Do you see things evolving more in that direction in terms of mobility management needed in order to manage the Internet of Things?
Yes, yes. We are continually looking at that entire space. I think the whole IoT kind of emerged out of the M2M space in a sort of a separate industry of where we emerged from, but we continually look at it. We do have some clients in which we do manage data-only devices that are not utilized by people. So, different type of technology applications. I think at some point in time there will be more convergence in that space, and so yes, we continually look at it. It's not a very big part of our business today, but over time that could change. But I completely agree. The statistics that you see of the number of devices that are enabled wirelessly in the next 5 years even, it's mind-boggling. And so those statistics catch a lot of people's attention, and it has our attention, but to this point in time, we still think the industry in which we support from an end-user perspective has significant growth as well, but ultimately, I do see some convergence ahead of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I've been talking with Mitch Black, president of Mobi. Mitch, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Kelly. I really appreciate it.